So I'd like to welcome our star host, Mr. David Quinn. Welcome, David. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Phil. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. And shout out to all my peeps out there. Hey.
Hey, everybody. So, David, tell us a little bit about why an IB for All approach has been so important to you.
Well, it's been important to me because I value the IB and I value students' relationships to education. And I recognize the fact that there's lots of times that schools in their creation begin to think about IB in one way, and they begin to leave students out of the equation. They start to think about it as a rigorous place where only elite students belong. And even the IB says that that's not true. And so part of my approach has been to think a lot about how students benefit, why they benefit, and how to go about recruiting those students who might be forgotten.
Awesome. Well, we're really looking forward to hearing the details and the way that you approach that and convince students to take part. Very quickly before we do, I would like to share a couple of research items that we have that align with this theme. The University of Chicago Consortium for school, basically Chicago public schools, conducted a research, and it's an excellent study that revealed that DP students were much more prepared than their peers and able to go directly into college and to stay in college beyond 2 years. And actually even the metrics on being more likely to be attending a selective college was also highlighted there. Also, there's a national study. Similarly, it's more of a quantitative research study that uses data from the National Student Clearinghouse that demonstrated that IB students are also much more likely than their peers right across the nation to enroll in university, even if they came from low-income homes. And this is a new study that's really exciting too, focusing specifically on US public education and showing us that students in the DP were much more prepared for college, adjusted to a very challenging workload. Even though that was difficult, that the schools that were supporting diverse student groups were developing systems to help students to acclimate to the rigor, study skills, and to persist in reaching their academic goals. And we'll get a little bit of a window into some of that from David's presentation. Just quickly, here is the graphic I mentioned. This comes from the Chicago Public Schools study. You can see that in all three cases there, that we have a huge advantage for students that were selecting to be in the diploma program compared to their peers in Chicago Public Schools. Here's a graphic here that I like to say that all students benefit from an IB education, even though this does represent low-income students or students receiving Title I services for education. The green bar on the far right you see is 46%, and that parallels with students from the same socioeconomic background in an IB program at 79% most likely to attend a college. And the national cohort there in gray. So all in all IB students are more successful than any other student in the country. And here's some narrative from the most recent study for the DP in US public schools. I'll let you read that. It's great to know that students felt that their campus teachers were, identifying in them the skills that they brought to the table. Awesome. So without further ado, David, is there anything that we need to know before you launch into your presentation?
Actually, there is, and I just thought of it, so I'm going to swap out the first 30 seconds. And this is important for everybody who's listening. I know we've got a bunch of attendees from not just the United States, but around the world. I'm going to talk today about how to bring the IB and to open up the IB to different students. And I don't want you to think that I did it at a school that was elite. And I don't want you to think that I did it at a school that was special. The majority of the experiences I'm going to talk about today were during my time as IB coordinator at Edmonds Woodway High School, which is a very nondescript high school in the suburbs of Seattle, Washington. And so when you see the presentation today and when you see the kinds of things that I'm going to talk about, I'm actually going to paralog a little bit. At some points today, you're actually going to be seeing the presentation that I give to 10th graders. And at other points, I'm going to be talking directly to you about my thinking, putting that together. So this is how I start. And I talk to students specifically about fear. And I do it by setting the stage that's kind of weird. You know, you want to catch the kids, especially the 10th graders. And so I say, here's a message brought to you by your great, 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 great grandparent. And they stare at me as if I'm strange, which I am. And I say, here's the thing. We all came from the same place hundreds of thousands of years ago. And we have certain evolutionary traits that were helpful to us. They benefited us. And here's how this might have played out. We're walking across the savannah, and we're with a group of our friends, and we're trying to survive because survival is kind of important. And we see this cave, and our friends run into the cave. They're like, "Yeah, let's go into the cave!" Ah! And you know that didn't really end well for them. And as you can see why, because there was something in the cave, and we were food because that's what human beings were for quite a while on this planet. And so fear is what actually stopped the folks from running into the cave. Fear is an evolutionary response, and it's a really appropriate evolutionary response to the lack of knowledge about any given situation. We move beyond fear when we have information to guide our thoughts. Reason is that antidote. And so I break frame and I say to students, look, it's 10th grade. I know you're probably afraid. Anybody comes in and starts talking about the IB, they put up the circle, they show you the photos, they start talking about the history of the IB, and you're afraid because you've heard things. Just listen to the presentation today. And you know, you might be thinking like, seriously, Quinn, like I don't want to hear about the history of the IB. I just want to get out of high school. And that's fine. I address that right at the top. I'll say to students all the time, like, look, here is the infamous chart, whatever the credit chart is. In Washington State, I was very fortunate. We told kids they could ignore that because Washington State had an IB diploma law. And that meant no additional credit requirements, no PE, no CTE, no personal finance, no health or art. You just got to do the IB diploma once you hit 11th grade. Now, this moved away a lot of the barriers right out of the gate. I would say, look, you're earning 2 diplomas at the same time, and it's a very unique way to graduate. And I specifically lay it out and say, look, this is how to get out of here, if that's what you're interested in. Because if you're coming from a place of fear, that's one thing. If you're coming from a place of reason, it's another. And if you're thinking about this from a reasonable perspective, you're just wanting to know, how do I get the IB diploma? Why would I get the IB diploma? And I hope to take you on a journey during this presentation. I'll tell the students all the time where I can answer both of those questions at the same time. So how do I get an IB diploma? Well, it's really easy. You just need a couple of fingers. First, I'll break it down and I'll say, this is what a higher level class is. It's a class that goes on for 2 years. The standard level class might go on for 2, it might go on for 1. 3 higher level classes, 3 standard level classes. Take a course called Theory of Knowledge and complete your CAS hours and the core experiences, earn points on an exam, and that's the IB diploma in a really simple way. I try not to overload students on the 400 pages of the hell pamphlet that gets loaded upon us every year as coordinators. And I'll say there's a core, and we'll talk more about those core experiences as we go on. But ultimately, if you were planning on going to college, you were probably going to be taking an English course, a history course, and a science course already. So we don't even have to think about those. You were probably going to stay in math because most colleges require math. I would hope that you would want to stay in language because most diploma programs, when you get to a university, are going to require you to speak another language or return to that Spanish class you dropped at the end of 10th grade. So explaining to students where they're going is often as important as explaining to them where they are. If you're going someplace and they're going to make you do all these things to get in, why wouldn't you do them and seek the advantage at the same time? So that's the diploma, 3, 3, and 3. I try to immediately demystify as well the experience of what it means to be an IB student. And I put up the learner profile because I think that it's actually something that we don't like to talk about a lot. We want to demonstrate it. We talk about what IB learners strive to be, but I say I want you to look at those words really carefully because I want to demystify stuff for you. Look for the word that you think is supposed to be there, the one that you're afraid of. What's the word? Genius. They've set themselves in their minds up to believe that you have to levitate in order to be an IB diploma student, that you have to somehow do all these things and take on all these other things, and that you can only be these special students to be IB. And that's just not true. In my experience and at my school, I have had students earn the full IB diploma who started with GPAs at 2.3 and sometimes below that, all the way to 4.0. I talk to students and I'll say, look, this is what it means for you. Ultimately, there are 6 IB class categories, and you're going to take 1 from each category. And if you do that, you earn the diploma. Now, I try to focus on the diploma for a really particular reason, because they want to create barriers for themselves. Your school district, your school might have barriers that I would hope that you work to erase. In my program, there was an application that used to happen in 8th grade. And so students would often say, oh, Mr. Quinn, I didn't fill out an application, so I guess I can't do it. And I would say, look, we have no barriers to entry in the IB program other than the ones that might exist for you in math. Really, the IB says you can start Spanish in 11th grade. There's an ab initio course for you. You can do Spanish SL. So if you didn't even start world language, you can start the IB diploma. You don't have a lot of science experience? Well, in my building, we worked to build a pathway for those kids. We offered IB Marine Science, IB Marine Biology, which is an SBS. We did it specifically because we knew there would be kids who would get to us at the end of 10th grade and say, I can't do it. So anytime a student starts to come to you and say, excuse, I always return to number 2. I just say, read number 2. Nobody is stopping you from having this experience but yourself. I want to introduce you to a different concept, though, because it's one that has to play out in your school. It's not just about students. If you asked your peers, other teachers, other IB teachers, other non-IB teachers, what does an IB student look like? Most of them wouldn't say this. This is Karush. Take a look at Karush's grades in 9th and 10th grade. And by the way, all the students you'll meet today have not only given us their permission to talk about them and show them pictures of you when they were in 10th grade, but to show you their grades. Karush made a big point of saying to me, please show my grades. Because look at his 10th grade grades. This does not look like an IB student to most schools. He was in chef school, which is great. He was in a bunch of pre-IB classes, but he was tanking some of them. He had a D in chemistry. And there were a lot of people in my building who said, oh, not Karush. No. So I think you should meet Karush again. That's Dr. Karush Manzourzadeh. And we asked him, once he put on the lab coat and once he bought his first dental practice, to come back and tell us what it was about the IB that helped benefit him. And I rarely read the slides, but this is a good one to read. If you gauged my first 2 years in high school, you would have never guessed in a million years I would be here today. I struggled immensely during my first 2 years of high school. In IB, they pushed individuals like me to build confidence to understand that I was capable of reaching my full potential. As an undergraduate, I used the habits and tools I gained in IB. Looking back, I'm forever in debt to my teachers. I wouldn't be here without them. He's not alone in his story. I told you, Edmonds Woodway was a relatively nondescript high school. We had an ELL, we haven't had an ELL program. I'm not there anymore. They have an ELL program. So we were often encountering students who had just arrived in the United States who maybe hadn't been speaking the language for that long. And I'd like you to meet some of those students now.
Hello there, my name is Giovanni Solomon. I'm a full IB diploma recipient. I grew up in Egypt and I moved to the US in May 2017.
Hello, my name is Daniela Acuna and I am a full IB diploma recipient from the class of 2016.
Hello, my name is Alexandria Green and I'm very excited that Quinn asked me to do this video so that I can speak out for people who don't have someone in their corner or that others feel like don't belong in certain places and spaces because of who they are, where they came from.
Originally, I was born in Colombia, but moved to the United States when I was only a year old. My mom didn't know the first thing about college in the United States, nor did anyone else in my family.
When I moved here, I didn't speak any English. I didn't really understand the culture. I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do with my life. And my high school counselor, she understood that. She put me in easy classes, made sure I was on track to graduate. And that was going to be it. 2 more years of this, and I'm done with high school.
School was not necessarily a priority for me for a long time. If it wasn't my personal life or the things that I thought were interesting, I didn't pay much attention to it.
I met Mr. Quinn at the end of my sophomore year. I just asked him what IB was. We had a 15-minute conversation about it. That's all it took to change the trajectory of my life. As I left his office that day with a chance to take ownership of my future, a chance to not settle anymore, to not just get by. And I took it.
Graduating high school was the only goal I really had set for myself by the time that I came into high school. And after deciding to join the IB program my junior year of high school, after I was convinced by our IB coordinator, I was guided and supported through the college application process by fellow IB candidates and our IB coordinator at the time.
But once 10th grade came and I started the IB program, between the teachers, the other students, and Mr. Quinn pushing and motivating me, I realized that there was so much more in this world for me. There was so many more things that I could achieve and strive to do.
IB classes encouraged a level of critical thinking that I hadn't encountered prior to taking IB classes, which pushed the boundaries of what I thought was possible for myself and eventually opened up the door to college.
Here I am 2 years later. I got a full ride to the University of Washington. I'm double majoring in mechanical and electrical engineering. I have my IB diploma, and I got 2 semesters worth of credit.
I'm currently a third-year pharmacy student at Xavier University of Louisiana College of Pharmacy. I was early accepted into the pharmacy program because of my IB background. Speaking with the admissions office and then saying, "Oh, you did IB? I think you'll be very well prepared for this. I think you'll be able to handle the rigor of entering pharmacy school early."
My cohort and my IB classes encouraged me to apply, become accepted, and eventually attend the University of Washington on a full ride, where I just graduated from with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. And next month, I start a Master's of Education program at the University of Washington.
So I'll be graduating in 2022 with my PharmD and hoping that I can bring other young Black men and women with me, show them that there's more out there for them in this world, that there's so many opportunities that they don't know about, but we can show them, that IB can show them, and teach them that there's more outside of that city that they live in, that school that they go to.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Thank you to the IB Foundation. You guys changed the trajectory of my life.
And I would just like to give a huge thank you to the IB program at Edmonds High School and to Mr. Quinn for all of the support to help me get to where I am today.
My name is Alexandria Green of Xavier University of Louisiana, and I'm IB for all.
Oh, I love my kids. I want to highlight something. The next slide that I'll generally show is the names of students. But for those of you watching right now, I want to highlight who you just met. You met students who'd never taken an honors class during their time in high school. You met students who didn't speak English 18 months before they began the IB program. One more time, because I want to make sure you hear it. You met a student who didn't speak the English language 18 months before he started in the IB program. And you met a young woman who's about a year away from becoming a pharmacist, who not only had never taken an honors class before, but she didn't think she was supposed to go to college. Now, I don't do anything magical. There's no special thing. When Gio said, I sat with Mr. Quinn and 15 minutes later. What I simply do is I open up the door and I ask a question. Why would you want to do this? And I ask students to answer it. And I ask them to think about something. High school is really strange, right? Because it's one of those wonderful places. We invite you in and ask you to leave. It's like, please join us, go. The whole point of coming is to go. So you're here to leave. What do you want to do when you leave? And I often frame it in this particular way. What does the 24-year-old version of you want to say to the 16-year-old version of you? Think about your hopes and dreams. Think about what the work you're doing right now and how to get there. Does the 24-year-old version of you want to say to the 16-year-old version of you, what were you thinking? Why did you listen to Ralph in the lunchroom? Right? Ralph was sitting next to you, getting ready to sign up for classes, and you were like, I'm going to go full IB. And Ralph was like, that sounds stupid. And you're like, you're right, that sounds stupid. Ralph isn't there to help you, okay? And Ralph is definitely not an IB Diploma Program coordinator, right? Ralph's a 16-year-old who has absolutely no experience. So if you're going to think about what you're going to do when you leave, let's set the stage then for what happens when you leave with an IB diploma. Now, clearly, college and university recognition of the IB varies from state to state, from province to province. And one of the things that's the most important thing to know is just how many colleges recognize the IB, right? There's over 1,600. Marie Vivas in our university recognition program at the IB does a tremendous job making sure that universities are really carefully understand what the IB program is, how it's evolving, how it's changing, and working to make sure that those credit policies are published. So sometimes, in my school, they had Chromebooks. I'd say to students to pop open their Chromebook, to pick any school they could think of that wasn't one of the ones they could just quickly name, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, they can always name those. So think of a local school, think of a school that might be aspirational to you, go to their website, just type in 2 letters, IB, hit return. And what they will almost always find is a generous credit allocation for students who are doing the full IB diploma. Now, I said that Edmonds Woodway was a relatively nondescript high school. And yet, that nondescript high school sent students to every major university all over the world. We've sent students to, those are just some of the ones. And I would say to 10th graders, look, when you get into 12th grade and you're filling out that college application, the counselor report says, is this a full IB diploma candidate? It's not like people don't know that Edmonds Woodway has 200 plus full IB diploma candidates in the building, right? They know. So explaining why you didn't do it might become your problem. Now, granted, well, I'll be clear, that's a little bit of a push and pull that some people aren't quite comfortable doing, but I'll change the subject then, right? And I'll say, is it about money? Because some of you don't think you can afford college. Presenting yourself as a full IB diploma candidate absolutely changes the game. I'm a member of the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. One of the things that I think is super important for IB coordinators is to learn as much about the college admissions process as possible. And so I'll say to kids sometimes, you like money? I like money. Go to the University of Washington, go to Western, your parents just pocketed $19,000 because with a full IB diploma, basic scores, you're going to start as a sophomore. You like money? Whitman costs $57,000 a year. Full IB diploma candidates automatically have sophomore status at Whitman. So that's a really nice car, and feel free to put license plates on it that say like Quinn and then bring me the keys. I like to joke about this slide, but I had a family, both of whose daughters did the full IB diploma. Dad ended up buying a boat and calling it the college fund because he had set aside money for his kids to go to college, and they ended up going for free. They specifically looked for schools that valued the IB. And the IB actually equals admission success. Not many people are familiar with this, this next slide. It talks about the overall acceptance rate, but I like to put this one up, especially for high achieving students who might be thinking on the bubble. Some of them are worried about their GPAs, some are not, but I want to put this one up first because I want to say, look, this is the general acceptance rate for students going to these universities. Check out the IB student acceptance rate. You're trying to get into Penn, you have more than double chance of getting a student into Penn with a full IB diploma than not. Cornell is a wickedly insane school to try to get into. Princeton, super challenging. Each one of these schools recognizes the value of the IB diploma and goes seeking those candidates. So you'll have folks who'll say, oh, Mr. Quinn, I need to totally protect my GPA. The GPA is the most important thing, right? And that's not the case. Because even in NACAC's own admissions trend survey, which it publishes every year, grades in college prep courses are more important than anything. So I've often asked admissions folks, would you rather see a B in the IB class or an A in a non-IB class, in a non-honors class? And we'd like them to be in the IB program. We recognize that, you know, it's better to show a college you're willing to challenge yourself, even if it means a lower grade. Just don't fail. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. You can take the word of somebody who's spent 12 years successfully placing kids at every major school in the world, and some of whom did not have the GPAs of their peers. So what's an IB student look like when they leave Edmonds-Woodway? Well, they're university bound, they're highly motivated, they're an all-around student, they're a problem solver. They represent the profile that the IB says that they are trying to promote. And it's across all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds. Edmonds-Woodway ran roughly 30%, 32% free reduced lunch. The program in my building ran the same percentage. We were entirely equitable. The percentages and the different socioeconomic and ethnographic groups were exactly the same in the IB program as they were in the building as a whole. And it gave us that little equity star that the IB loves to give out. You might ask yourself about the balance of your own program then and say, well, you know, how do you go about making sure that you're building diplomas? One of the things you have to stop and consider is this. Are you offering the courses that you want to offer, or are you offering the courses that will help students earn the diploma? Because the diploma is doable, right? No special credit requirements, no outside course requirements. I've had advanced students do the IB. I've had students who've ended up, you know, playing in Carnegie Hall at the Essentially Ellington competition. Our school's jazz band was nationally recognized, and every year kids would go to Essentially Ellington and be full IB. I'd have advanced athletes. The quarterback for Amherst is a full IB diploma candidate from Edmonds-Woodway. They would say, "Oh, Mr. Quinn, I can't be in the IB. I'm an athlete." So I went and unpacked the percentage of honors and IB students who were on all the teams. And the joke was, if I took all the IB kids out, we wouldn't have sports at Edmonds-Woodway anymore, because there was a huge percentage of kids not just doing one, but doing two. There's the young man who was the quarterback at Amherst. There's the jazz band. That's Washington State's #1 soccer team. I think that was 4 years ago. Almost every face you can see, so it was 5 years ago, almost every face you can see there is a full IB diploma candidate. The soccer turned out to be a pretty great sport for full IB kids. You could run and study at the same time. And the last thing I'll comment on is this. As students are thinking about themselves, they want to turn to their peers naturally. And as coordinators, you want to, and I wanted to, like, turn the corner, be in front of that, and say right up at the beginning, right? You might be afraid, you might have no experiences in IB, but the last person you should ask is the 15-year-old sitting next to you, because they will tell you they have all the answers. Stop and ask yourself a question. Does the person who's giving me this information have any experience in IB courses, or are they just Ralph? Always gets a laugh. But importantly, it gets students to stop and think that there's someone who has better information than my best friend. There's someone who has better information than my neighbor. And then you open the door and you visit classrooms. And so one of the most important things that I would do every year as students were building their schedules is that I would actually visit every class. And I'd say, hey, I'm just going to sit outside in the hallway for a while building IB schedules. Paper is really cheap. I'll make you a schedule, no matter who you are, no matter what your background is. I'll make you an IB schedule for 2 years. And then if you don't like it, you can crumple it up and throw it away. Do you not want me to do it in a blue pen? Fine, I'll do it in a purple pen. You want me to do it in a red pen? Also good. And sometimes I would make a schedule and a kid would come back 2 weeks later and say, you know, I thought about this schedule. I really don't like it. Would you make me another one? Sure, paper's free. And I will make schedule after schedule after schedule. Just the framework of it, so that students understand the sequence is simple. You were in 9th and 10th grade. And this was the slide from the honors program that we would show honors parents to help them to understand what came next. And then the next slide is I'll build a schedule for you. So it isn't as hard as you think. Students want academic preparation for college. They're aware of their strengths. They're aware of their weaknesses. At Edmonds-Woodway, I had to ask 3 questions. I would say, are you in the music program? Because if students were in the music program and didn't want to give up jazz and wanted to maybe end up in Carnegie Hall, I had to make sure that they were going to take IB music as their sixth subject. I always ask if students are interested in engineering, because if they're interested in engineering, they've got to be in IB physics. Even if they don't take it as a diploma subject, they need to make sure they've had that 1 year of physics in the portfolio, or they can apply to as many engineering schools as they want and they're not getting in. Doing the 2 years, we had a 2-year IB Physics SL program. Seeing the 2 years from the college side, the colleges would see that and be like, wow, that kid's really prepared to be successful in physics. They've done 2 years, even though it was only an SL class. And then lastly, I say, how do you feel about math and science? Now look, let's be candid. The non-math kids will just immediately be like, I hate math. And the chemistry kids light up immediately. Are you a bio kid or a chem kid? The chem kids always know they're chem kids. There's something about chemistry that just attunes and affines. The bio kids, I just like to say, you're not a physics kid. You're not a chem kid. Are you interested in going into medicine? Again, to be fair, I have more than 5% of the kids doing bio and chem, doing a 4HL diploma. A lot of them want to do it because they want to make sure they're as prepared as possible for their undergraduate experience. But that's when strategy kicks in. So I might have a student taking an English, history, bio, and chem, but they might not sit for the bio HL exam. I'm going to go back one slide, Phil, if you don't mind. When I'm sitting and building a schedule, there's some things that are just natural. IB English is going to happen. IB history is going to happen. I was in a building where history was a benchmark. It was something that we said all students are doing. This might not be true for your program. You might have even more flexibility than I had. I didn't have a great deal of flexibility. I had to put students in IB English and IB history HL. From there, I would say, what math are you in? I knew I had to get them to 1 year of applications SL at the bottom, no matter how far down you were going. It used to be math analysis. I'm sorry, it should be math studies, or we jokingly refer to it as math for poets. But I have to get you to math analysis if you're going to be in engineering, and I have to get you to math applications just to get to the diploma. Do you like bio? Do you like chem? Something goes in that spot. Are you interested in engineering? Something's got to go in that spot. You keep going in language, and then do I want to ramp you into the IB program? If you're a student who's coming to me with some academic challenges, I'm not giving you that SL class in the junior year. I want to make sure that you've got some space in your schedule in the junior year to grow. If your school requires students to be in a class there and it's not going to be IB, try to think of a class like yoga. We had yoga lattes in our building, and I would always say to my most freaked out kids, I'm like, you need to be in yoga. They're like, why? I'm like, you'll learn how to breathe for a whole year while you're working on your IB diploma. In your senior year, I'll put you in a sixth subject. And that gives students the opportunity to ramp up. Now, I've had students in the opposite place, super strong academics. They want that 12th grade year. They want some room in their schedule to work on college applications. And they know they're going to need time to work on their extended essay more. So they'll say, no, load me up in the junior year. Give me space in the senior year. And so it's about playing that space. So I'll show you some sample schedules because these are the ones that I make, and it's kind of what I'm thinking. There'll be a kid who'll walk in and he'll just honestly say, Quinn, just get me across the stage. I want a full IB diploma, but I just want to get out of here. Fine. IB English, IB history. This was in our old terminology for math. We don't use these terms anymore, but IB math studies, a 1 year marine science course, 2 years of language, and I'll put you in business management as your third HL. Your HLs, English, history, businessman. Your 3 SLs, math studies, marine science, and Spanish SL. Diploma. A student who comes with a different set of experiences, they'll say, maybe I'm not so good in math and science, but let's say they started Spanish early. There were some students in my district who had just a small bit of Spanish in middle school. And so they started in high school in Spanish too, and I could get them to Spanish HL. So English, history, Spanish was great because that liberated them completely from the need or the desire to take another HL class, especially if they weren't really a math or science kid. Having that kind of a pathway, thinking about how you build a program towards certain pathways is a way to open up the program. And it's one of the ways marine science was one of the ways that our program went from having 45 and 50 kids a year in it to having over 100 kids a year in it. Because suddenly I didn't need a 2-year science block. I wasn't pushing the science kids the whole time. I was finding a space for the kids who weren't interested in the sciences. Creating a diploma like that gives you something like this. I can do bio, but just not math. Okay, great. English, history, and bio. I've had students start the diploma in 11th grade at Algebra 2, knowing I just had to get them into 1 year of math studies. Let's be candid. Does the IB want an SL experience to be 2 years? Yeah, but my scores have shown that you can do 1 year of math, do the SL course in a year, and have enough experience to go on and be successful in college. That student is in all likelihood not going into engineering, and they probably were never going into engineering. They were going to take a soft math when they get to college, and that space is available for them. I'm preparing them for that next experience. So, you know, the kid who comes in and says, Mr. Quinn, I'm really lazy. Fine. In my building, you could actually end up taking fewer classes, 5 IB classes as a junior, 5 IB classes as a senior, have a hole in your schedule on both sides, as long as you were a certain place in math. And I've had students walk across the stage saying just that. They think they're going some lazy route. But from the college perspective, they are prepared to be successful because they've got the IB diploma. CAS is obviously an important part of this, and I try to make sure to find that careful balance with CAS. You want students who aren't just living behind the desk. I mean, no college wants that. So having students understand why they're doing CAS is super important as well, and I find that to be really true of the university experience. If I'm setting up 10th graders to understand the importance of CAS from the beginning, they won't see it as a set of goals or, frankly, a set of hours in their experiences. They'll be saying to themselves, I'm doing this to become a more whole person. I'm doing this to fulfill the ideals of the IB. And on top of it, I've got a nice stack of information for my resume when I start talking about myself for college, because I can explore my passions and they can come out on the other side in the form of the application. The same is true of TOK and the extended essay. I'm really upfront about TOK. It's a place to explore thinking. I try to make sure that they and the folks who are teaching the course remember that this is not a course where you want to be doing a lot of homework. The IB says, like, don't go home and send kids with dozens of pages of reading. If that's happening in your building, you're not really doing TOK in the way that they want it to be done. So TOK is an experience that happens in the room, and ultimately, what are you doing? An essay, an artifact, and you're done. The extended essay is really a place to promote the student themselves. So when I'm sitting with them that first time, I'll say, "What do you? If I could lead you on a desert island study, just one or two things, what would you really want to do?" Some kids have said, like, "I just want to watch movies." Cool, you can do that in the IB. What? Oh yeah, we have a film class. You can write an extended essay on film. Some students just their heads are in books. They love to read literature. Great. No need to pick new things. Choose texts that you're familiar with. Choose ideas that you want to follow. Study them and pursue your passion. The best part about the extended essay, when you think about it from a program perspective, isn't just the research that students get to do, right? It's their ability to talk about what they're passionate about. So even if it's not something they study in college, I had a student go off and study Native American powwows. It wasn't something that he was planning on doing in college, but he was really interested in ethnography. What did he do during the application process? People would say, "Tell me about your IB experience." He would immediately start talking about his extended essay. Colleges lit up on the idea of a student who was pursuing a passion and doing so through research. So the extended essay is one of the most important parts of the diploma. Sometimes I know a lot of schools kind of push it to the side and say, choose this, do global studies, or do world studies, be done with it. But the reality is that this is a key. And as a coordinator, setting the frame for that early, getting students interested in November of their junior year, so that when they really begin to hit their stride at the end of their junior year, they're actively working on it. But giving them that thinking time at the beginning, and giving them that time to process in those first 3 or 4 months of the program turns out to be really important, especially if they know why they're doing it. You're doing this because when you're sitting across from that dude who's going to interview for Brandeis. When you're going to Boston College and you're going to do a one-on-one interview, you can pull out your extended essay and say, look, I know that you might not have the time to read this now, but I did want to leave this with you to show you what I'm passionate about. Kids really get that. My last slide, I think, is this idea of building an IB for all world school. I'm really passionate about it. I think that probably comes across. Phil's always saying, David, take it down a notch. Yeah, you do, Phil. But the reality is this. The students you met in that video earlier, they weren't the only ones. They're in your building right now. They're in your 10th grade. There's a young person who wants to go to college, but doesn't even know how the process works, like Daniela Acuna. There's a person who was given a set of courses and told, just, go about doing that and graduate from high school. You're not really an English language speaker, so we really just want to make sure you graduate. That was Geo. And there was a student who didn't even see herself as graduating from high school, didn't see herself and the place that she could be. As she likes to say now, she takes up the space that she's supposed to be taking up in the world. And she's making a space for other young African-American women. She was never going to college. She's going to be a doctor next year. They weren't alone. They were all over my building. And I didn't do anything special to find them. I just opened the door and asked them to help me understand what they wanted. And then I would frame the experience towards who they were. If you're thinking about your program right now, and it was built by teachers, well, that's easy. That's how school works. Teachers picked what classes they should offer. Maybe it was a class that a bunch of teachers were really good at. Maybe it's just something that they did in the past. But when was the last time your school actually opened up the IB guide and went looking for courses you think students might actually want to sign up for, or ones that you could help build the program on? So IB Business and Management, that's a program builder because the course is interesting and it's directly connected to something the kids think they're going to be about, business. And yet the course isn't going to kill them. Because nobody talks every day about, oh, wow, business management, man, that course really kills my kids. No, it's a really direct, straightforward, exciting course, where students can study businesses and management and relationships between individuals and societies in the corporate world. And kids who are into that are into that. But it's not filled with physics formulas. So using that as another bench gets you to those 3 HLs. And then after that, SLs are kind of easy to find. The last thing I'll say is this. We turned down the dials at Edmonds Woodway. I was a person who turned up the dials when I was an IB teacher. I thought that giving more homework was the most important thing. I thought that turning up the workload was the most important thing. We did that exercise that the IB often tells you to do. We asked everybody how much homework they thought was appropriate for kids. And then we asked them in the same survey how much homework they were giving. Well, it turned out that the amount of homework they thought kids should be doing all night was pretty much the amount of homework they were giving in their course. So we had to stop and say, what is the healthy amount so that students can be more than just academics? They can be whole people. They can see themselves as part of the learner profile, and they can see themselves outside of school. Much like we need work-life balance, students need that, and the program naturally gives that to them. But if your program is out there trying to figure out how to squeeze sevens out of human flesh, ultimately in the end, I don't think that that's a successful IB program. You've got scores for kids who have already left. They're kind of like your badges. And the real badge comes 4 years later, when the student comes back and says, I just got into medical school, or I got through school in 3 years because of the IB diploma, and I'm now going to do X. Setting them on their path, helping them to get on their path, no matter who they are, erasing all those prerequisites that you might have in your course guide, turns out to be the way to grow a program. Will there be teachers who say, oh gosh, I'm differentiating a lot more than I used to? Sure, but they're teaching kids, not their course. And that's the most important thing. Teach the student, not the course. And in doing so, you'll find more IB students, more full diploma candidates, and have a more vibrant program. Last thing I'll say is this. You might be watching this right now and think that this is just a bunch of Hufflepuff. You might have a really rigorous program out there that you really like for the 12 kids who are in it, and you want to protect your full IB diploma cohort percentage and the overall numbers you have in your courses. I'll tell you two things. When our building went IB for all, the scores in English went up, not down, when there were far more diverse students in the cohort. And the second thing I'll say is this, and it's a badge that I kind of wear with a lot of honor. Last year and the year before, my program had a 98% diploma program rate with an average score over 30. Something to be very proud of. This year, the grading kind of got to us. One student didn't get his diploma. But in a cohort of over 100 kids, I'm pretty proud of that. Kids who were as diverse as the entire school population were in our program and were amazingly successful. You can be too.